Yep.
What's up, Hero?
Jim, friends, hey, so not better or not, but understood for sure. Hey, True.
Morning.
Hey, True. Hey, Mina. What's up, Hero?
Can everybody?
GM.
GM. I don't know if more people will join us, but I suggest we get started since we have quite a few things on the agenda today. I posted the suggestion earlier, Think Decade. Thank you for organizing it. We have a couple of things: the department proposal, multisig, Gitcoin, BDIP 7, Collabland, and then probably follow up on these two from last week. Are there any other suggestions?
I'd love us to be able to talk about what to do about quorum, but I don't know if there'll be time after all of that.
That's a good point. I actually wanted to use like this 07 as like a talking point there. So that's a good point to get.
Okay.
Perfect. Shall we start with the first one, the department proposal? As you all may know, it failed grants committee last time. They wanted us to specify the mandate better as well as the scope of work. And then for the KPIs, the ask was to not only have number of proposals, but then have like some sort of qualitative metric. So I changed it to the ones that pass quorum instead of only number of proposals. And then, yeah, the things that we were doing in terms of dividing into work groups and prioritizing, I used it as scope of work. So a lot of the earlier points were removed. And yeah, inside the budget, I added comp for season 7 work group. So this sort of replaces the rewards that we were planning. However, I bumped it down to 100K just in case we want to experiment something there. But I know Ernest and others have already kickstarted a conversation in the ThriveCoin workstream. But yeah, besides that, there are no major other changes. Any comments or suggestions?
I think that sounds good, Jenga. Thanks for taking the lead on all that. Do you have a sense of when it's going to go back up in front of the GC?
I was more looking at if there was no objections today, then I can post it and yeah, it's the same, get quorum and go to GC.
Oh, so they actually want you to repost the proposal, re-reach quorum, which whatever number that is, I don't even know that we know. And then, interesting. Okay, so we're starting from scratch, huh?
At least that is the impression I got. I know Think Decades, and I do know something that I don't know.
Once you reach quorum, it counts. If you have to update the proposal, then the updated version has to be just uploaded. And we would have, at least as far as I know, 1 week prior, the final version has to be kind of in, so we have enough time to review. So this means if you somewhat manage to, and I think at 11 p.m. UTC, whatever. So like if you get the updated version up today, by the end of the day, next week, Monday, we can review it. If you get it up by tomorrow or Wednesday, we get actually all the proposals that were gone live before today, if you know what I mean, to review. And then the department proposal would be up like 2 weeks, Monday and 2 weeks from now. Does this make sense?
So I can upload it like as soon as this meeting is over, but do we have to meet quorum or not?
Did you meet quorum before?
The ask was slightly different.
Sorry?
The ask was lower.
Mm-hmm. How much was the ask?
500.
Wow. Okay. Good question. That's a good question. I don't know is the answer on my side. I think Becky, do you have actually an idea? Because I know that, when changes were made, but the funding request wasn't changed, then it was fine to just update it. But in case the funding request changes,
we share it to grant committee. Hey, we've done your update. We go back and defend it, and we are good to go. As far as I'm concerned, that is the mind map I have.
Yeah, but are we obligated to gather new consensus because the funding request has changed differently? This is, I think, the question at hand. Oh, significantly, like 300,000 bank more.
Personally, I would expect grants committee to do that if someone came back with double the ask.
Post this with a poll as well as tune into what you all say in the grants committee meeting. Okay, then the next one is this multisig and swapping multisig. Now there is a sub-thread here where we were discussing like what should be the requirements and how will this process flow. Now we think that there would be two sort of parallel streams. One is to actually have like a policy and approve it, and second is to swap. If my internet loads, yeah, swap the existing signers as well as some rights and qualifications. In total, these will be 5 proposals that we thought about at least. But Senad, you wrote the first draft. Maybe you want to give us a few words?
Yeah, sure. First draft is the basic one. Okay, let me get one step back. The idea is to create a framework to swap the signers and establish new criteria for the multisig. If you scroll up a little bit, Jenga, the strategy here is to a little bit up to the top. The strategy here, yeah, thank you, is exactly first create a temp check, then a BDIP, then an application submission, and then a multi-signer vote, which is basically the ratification of the election. And so for some of them, you need you don't need snapshot. For some of them, you need. So we assume that 2 of those proposals have to go through snapshot. And the idea, like for the strategy part, is just to figure out how long it would take and how many proposals. So this is that part, and this proposal per se is just a temp check. So if you scroll down, the idea is, okay, we notice that the signers aren't active. We think that the signers should be active, and we think that the signers should be swapped. This is at least the consensus we have within this group. And now we kind of try to lay it down as well as get a sense of whether the community thinks that the rights and responsibilities are perhaps qualified. Like I have to look into it and see which edits were made. I wasn't able to do that today. Could or should be added. But the general goal and purpose of this proposal is to check whether the community feels that the signer should be swapped or not.
Thanks, Anand. Any suggestions or comments? Okay, if not, do we know when this will ship?
That's a good question. Sometime this week is actually the goal, because what would be great actually is if we could go through the process within a season. If the community, feels we should swap the signers, right? Because there needs to be all these proposals and the election and that snapshot on chain. Like, there's so much to go through. And so I would like to ship this until the end of this week. And I would ask all of you to maybe go in, because this is a problem that I in general have, is I put too much in, right? I just said, the purpose is to check whether we want to swap the signers or not. The idea would be whether, to check whether we need to also find out if the mandate should be asked. Like, I just input a little bit input and kind of framing, maybe TrueCat or someone else who already waited and just to figure out how to structure it, and then putting up for vote. And once we have the temp check, we can kind of create the BDIP on top of that.
Yeah, I can have another look. I left just one comment just around like the parameters that have been put there, because I don't really think we should restrict it to people who had a role in the last month or season. I don't think the DAO's old enough to start saying that people haven't been active recently enough, or in a role recently enough.
What do you think about the scope of the proposal? Like, do you think there's like much more in there?
Thoughts?
I would appreciate that. Thanks. Sorry for
You're
putting you on the spot there.
That's okay. I mean, it's 5 a.m., so I'm not doing it now.
All right. Great. Thanks.
Right, awesome. Looking forward to seeing this on forum, hopefully this week. And then there's a policy. This is Think Decade. Think Decade, do you want to share something?
Damn it! I was looking for a meme to share about how TrueCut scrutinizes proposals. But thanks for.
I should maybe just put my editor Chippy in, and that'll be doing.
Yeah. So, okay. So just like Senat said, I think personally I'm a bit confused here, and so I decided to just leave it as it is. So maybe we get some clarity around this, and that is like the policy, right? Like, are we creating like a policy that will serve as a sort of a guiding principle about how BDAO, go about its multisig, or are we just proceeding with the BDIP, and that would maybe double as the policy? Because I see that there are a lot of parameters in the BDIP. So yeah, I mean, but this is basically like the framework we spoke about last week, like a skeleton, and then we'll see if we'll see how we'll give it a meat or a body. So yeah, as it stands now, I'm a bit confused how to like blend this one and then the BDIP.
I mean, this is the sort of thing we need to decide whether there's a lot of aspects here to the policy, and we would need to decide as part of the Constitution update whether we think all of this information goes into the Constitution, or whether
The Constitution currently say, or how does it reference multi-sig signers now?
I don't think it does.
I don't remember that it does either. Yeah, and so interesting. I mean, what would be the arguments for putting specific qualifications for multi-sig signers within the Constitution itself?
To have it all in one place and to have it, ratified as one of the DAO's rules.
This is the way that we do business. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's a lot. I mean, our Constitution's going to run to quite a number of screens if we put everything in. Because if you can imagine, then if this gets repeated for grants committee requirements, and then it also gets repeated probably for some, maybe not for guilds and projects, but it's going to start to really get fat.
Yes, that's my concern, but maybe that's not. Maybe now is not an appropriate time to discuss. Yeah, I get nervous about just building some big fat constitution. But I know you changed your mind. We haven't talked about that. I do want to hear Ernest's convincing speech, though, like I told you. But we'll save that for the Constitution work meeting later this week with Mina. So all good.
But yeah, in the meantime, I think it's worth just filling out this document separately to a BDIP. Do you disagree, Think Decade, or?
Sorry, Drew, could you repeat that?
I think this, I didn't, last night when I looked, I didn't really get why there were two separate ones. But now I understand that you were just looking at actual policy, and I think it's still worth actually trying to populate this document as a separate thing to those temp checks and BDIPs, because this is not speaking to the community about getting input. It's just literally listing the information. Do you think it's worth pursuing? Or do you feel like maybe we just get it into the BDIP?
So that is the question I also have. If the squad thinks we can roll it up into the BDIP, I think that would, I'm fine by that. In fact, I'll be more happy with that because this is a lot of work.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. It's a lot to put in a BDIP too, and that's ultimately it's going to depend on whether it goes in the Constitution. Because if it's going to go in the Constitution, it needs to be in the BDIP eventually, the one that is voted on.
Yeah, and I would also suggest to start with the minimum requirements that you need, right? Start with not necessarily philosophical fundamentals, but just basic requirements. Like what are signers? Why do we need signers? Who are those signers going to be? What are the signers supposed to do? Full stop. Right? It's like the more complicated we make it, the more we have to change afterward. These things can act as hurdles or blockers later on when we need to maybe move a bit more, not agile, but faster, let's say, and make decisions. So I would be totally for like the minimum viable structure for signers and their relationship to the DAO.
Same. Cool. So your plan is to put up a temp check on the forum this week, and then we'll kind of go from there based upon that feedback, draft a BDIP, and get that up?
Yeah, correct.
Awesome.
I think, Decade, do you have everything you need?
Yep, I do.
Perfect. Glad to see the multi-sig question moving forward faster than I expected. Next is the grants proposal by Gitcoin. Now, this is something that me and a few people that the stewards at Gitcoin got in touch with have been working with. LDR, Gitcoin is building GrantStack, which is a platform where different types of funding can be done in a decentralized way. In the governance channel, I have posted a link which where Owaki and someone else, I think Griff Green, talk about different types of funding mechanisms. And then the vision with this GrantStack is that eventually all of these funding mechanisms would be available on this platform, and then communities can choose between these different types for different use cases, so that eventually we can move away from a centralized committee making decisions and move to a more decentralized Web3 native way of doing things. Now, this is like the big picture. The context here for us is to have a pilot round in season 7. And then this is exactly like Gitcoin grants, but in this case, we get to sort of gate this round and design who gets to go in, who gets to not go in, possibly have payments done in bank instead of other tokens. And then there's this additional benefit of having Gitcoin Passport as a way to, Gitcoin Passport as a way to have Sybil resistance. There's a bit more nuance here, but essentially if you have a 21 score, which is you have more than a few things enabled on Gitcoin Passport, then you're, a verified human. And then, this allows us to do it in a Sybil resistant way. What is the expected results? One is to, of course, check the whole process for Gitcoin grants, since this is pretty much alpha for them. Second is to identify early product market fit for our own projects. And then finally is to attract external capital. So it's not only people within the DAO, donating, but possibly others. And then finally, if we are able to do this successfully, we probably even attract some PR for this. Their suggestion was to have 4 million bank as matching. I brought them down to 1 million, but again, this is just my LARPed suggestion, open to other ideas. But yeah, and then right now there is no lower limit, but we can set it if you think that makes sense.
I'm just trying to get a sense of how much expectation there is on the community to be putting funds into this. Because that's a new thing. I don't dislike the idea necessarily, but it's a completely new approach to have the BanklessDAO community and, as you said, possibly others funding our projects. So I'm just wondering, like, are we expecting 1 million bank to be coming from the community? Is it? It's not equal, is it? Like the matching ends up being more than the donations, or that's what I don't understand about quadratic funding.
The matching is like definitely way more. I would say even like one bank donation from it could be even 0.1 bank, right? It's more of like this where.
Yeah. So in other words, if the DAO ended up spending 1 million bank, perhaps 500K would have come from the community, or would it be way lower that maybe 100K in donations would have come in for us to have to match 1 million? Just trying to get a sense of what the community spend would be in order for us to spend the 1 million.
Yeah, this is
and maybe you can answer that.
Have suggestions?
No, I'm just curious to know, because, and then the other question that I have is what happens to projects that don't qualify for this? Are you suggesting that the DAO doesn't fund any of those at all? Or would there still be a separate?
Oh, here, this one is just a pilot round for us to test this whole thing. This doesn't change anything
else outside.
Yeah. So, I mean, I
but
think
it would change it for the projects involved. You wouldn't want them also going to grants committee for funds.
If we adopt this as our official funding mechanism, then yes, they don't go to grants committee, at least for seasonal funding.
But you'd be willing to have them in the pilot round and also seeking funding in one season.
I mean, we can do, if hypothetically we do the round and we really like it, and then we propose that season 8 everything is quadratic funding, then there's no seasonal funding. Yeah. And of course, if it fails, and then we say no, we need to stick with the existing process, then that continues. And we might also receive some input on how much the community is willing to donate with the pilot, because yeah, we can speculate here like 100K or 100 bank, but it's really hard to know.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to get a sense of, like, if we were to spend the full 1 million bank, how much would have come from the community in order for us to do that?
So, Jenga, are there, which projects are participating in? And the next one to be is, are we going to open it up for anyone to participate, like the community members, anyone to contribute? Are there any issues of Cyber that we want to look at?
Yeah, so my suggestion is to have projects which have previously received funding for more than 2 seasons to be eligible. This means that other groups like department skills, as well as short-term projects or unfunded groups, are ineligible. This is my suggestion. If you have any different ideas, I'm welcome to hearing them. And then, yeah, there is a Sybil resistance mechanism. It's this Gitcoin passport. So yeah, anyone can do it.
I think my 2 bank on this is it's like novel and interesting and excited for the pilot, would want to be cautious on rolling it out DAO-wide, obviously. I mean, part of the key for projects is budget predictability. And like, I know that, quadratic funding would make that process much less certain. Not saying we can't learn to adapt, but I would just caution against a complete rollout in S8, even if the S7 pilot was successful. But either way, like, exciting and interesting. So cool to watch it proceed. Is that something that you're championing, Jenga?
Yeah.
This process? Cool. Yeah, just keep us in the loop. Curious.
All right. Thanks, everyone. To your point, TrueCat, I don't know, to be honest, like what should be the minimum that unlocks the million bank in question. But there's something I can speak more with Gitcoin and get back to. Again, we are still in conversation with Gitcoin about this. So yeah, but just wanted to get everyone's comments and sentiments in before we proceed. If you have any suggestions, please add them to this document so we can take a look at them. But,
May I ask, please, where is the link shared here? I arrived late. Sorry for barging in. Is it shared anyone in the?
if you go to the beta governance channel, ThinkTech shared a link to the Notion. All of these are there. Here's the link.
Okay, got it. Yes. See, thank you.
Perfect. Next, we have the BDIP 07. This was about changing the seasonal timeline. Now, this was quite an interesting case that I was at least looking at. This was posted 7 days ago. Yeah, already on 61 votes. So I was like curious as to how is it possible that you all did it, but then there are many other BDIPs like BDIP 4 adding departments, BDIP 3 changing quorum that still haven't. So we were having a conversation in the governance channel on how people are doing it. We at least identified these 4 factors, as well as the one that you suggested, Ernest, as a few reasons why proposals get the attention that they have. But, yeah, interesting to hear other comments or suggestions here.
I think you definitely need to raise awareness, either as a working group or as an individual. Otherwise, you're not going to reach quorum. You need to, it's like in real life. You need to motivate your voters, or at least get them to vote. I mean, we have fight with voter apathy since thousands of years. I think this is a common problem. So, but this begs the question: how do you do that in a kind of in an objective way? I think TrueCat and I have already chatted about is like, how do you ensure that if you reach out and seek for a vote, it's not a positive or a yes vote, and whether you can ensure that in any ways. Like, how do you reach out, or how do you make announcements as objective as possible so people can vote? And I know we have the announcements channel, but I don't think a lot of people are checking it, even though it should be checked. But there are a bunch of notifications on the day, and one can forget it. So how do we make this in a way that we don't influence the vote of the voter? I think that's the main question.
Like, just a devil's advocate, this thing for a sec, like, what is the real issue with like trying to lobby people to vote for your proposal? Now, like the way that, TrueCat led this, and then, some of the direct lobbying, for lack of a better term, that I did, like, we didn't do that because it kind of felt weird. But I do wonder, like what is the problem with going, hey, we created a proposal, we think it's awesome, we hope you agree, vote yes for it. Now, like, it feels wrong, but I'm just kind of like curious why we're having that sense, because I do have that sense as well.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I have an answer, but I can wait for someone else to weigh in if they want to.
Just wanted to ask, like, how much time did you all spend on this, if you could estimate?
On what in particular?
Like the campaigning.
Oh, I mean, for me personally, not a lot. Like it was, I mean, way less than a couple hours. You know, it was a drop in the BC server, and then I dropped it in the Writers Guild Coordination DM and a couple other DMs, but not much, to be honest. But true.
Yeah, I mean, I shared that I wrote in the DM, and so for me, it was literally a case of just going through my DMs, and I probably DM'd 20, 25 people with that same text, and just, I mean, it was, you know, a person reading either side, but apart from that, it was just that message.
Yeah,
so
like
I probably, I don't know, 15 or 20 minutes. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, it was under an hour for me as well. I reached out to a few individuals that I was kind of sure haven't voted, and I saw the immediate impact a few hours later, or at least a few minutes sometimes. Which also begs the question whether those people have really read the proposal or not, which is kind of what we're trying to discuss here too, and what Hero has raised. And I think, you know, Hero, to your point, that's exactly right. You want people to weigh in and ideally to leave a comment and make the proposal better through their input. And if they support, they support. It's a simple yes, right? But some people will just weigh in. I think we just have, at least how it feels for me, is like there's so many to-dos and reading every single proposal isn't possible. I would lie if I said I read every single proposal in the last 3 months, even though I would love to, but I can't, or I didn't. And so I think, you know, at least for those people, they believe people feel the same, and you know, if it's the case for themselves, then it's probably the case for others too. And so we assume that, you know, if you vote on proposals, there's a high probability if you try to get a vote that this will be a vote without, you know, without making the informed decision yourself or without going through the proposal. And so probably people that are like, this begs the question, like, is the, you know, what's the problem behind that? And it may be that, especially in the DAO context, there's a high probability that if you lobby or like if you extensively reach out and reach quorum through certain things, you might get a proposal to pass or reach quorum that would have otherwise not reached it. That being said, this doesn't necessarily mean it will be enforced or it will, you know, be, how should I say, activated or kind of, or more or less enforced, because we can add a layer of security. So we could basically say, like, let's engineer it towards, if you throw up a proposal, try to get the votes. If you have reached quorum, we have this, I call it layer of security. In this case, it could be the governance department that, again, looks at the proposal and sees, you know, whether things work out or not. Does this make sense?
I'm not sure I understood that last part, Sanat, about the role of the governance department and kind of looking through proposals that have been submitted, other than I'd be hopeful that we'd be commenting on them. But what was to your point there? I'm sorry.
Thank you. No, the point there was that not every proposal is a funding proposal, so not every proposal that reaches quorum goes to the grants committee. We ratify BDIPs right away. So what happened, for example, is that we ratified or moved BDIPs to snapshot without them having they didn't reach quorum. And so what we kind of also tried to do at the same time with the multi-signers. So this could be a role for the multi-signers, right? The multi-signers review proposals, or BDIPs in this case, are supposed to go to snapshot one more time, right? And see if, you know, the things are quote unquote in order. This sounds like a bit strange, but they are the quote unquote layer of security for those proposals that have reached and passed quorum, you know, right? Despite maybe, so imagine you throw up a proposal as a BDIP, right? And you lobby extensively. 100% of the system is corrupt. Every single person votes yes, but this is a bad actor proposal. And so the multi-signers are not corrupt. So the multi-signers see that. Should they move this proposal to our constitution or not? Should they have the opportunity to veto or not? Right? This is what I kind of mean as, you know, they check the proposal one more time. You know, even if the whole community is corrupt, they will potentially add a layer of security. And these could be the multi-signers, and this could be kind of part of the governance department. This is kind of where I was heading to and trying to see whether this makes sense or not.
Cool. Yeah, it's interesting, right? Like a lot of the DAOs that have automatic treasury triggers that use Governor Bravo or whatever, will have sort of this cooling off period in between the outcome of the vote and the trigger that allows for some kind of security layer. Maybe that's the foundation. Maybe it's some just select community members who sit on some kind of board, right? Which it's sort of interesting to think about. We don't have automatic treasury triggers, obviously, yet. But to your point, Sanad, like it's an interesting use case for the multi-sig signers. Yeah, and I do think some kind of layer of human security is important, right? Because we all can trust each other here, but who knows what it's like in 3 years? And it's a good point. I think it's probably actually worthy of some pretty good discussion about what kind of human security layers we would want as we move more of our work on chain, right?
Yeah.
And we even proposed this veto in the proposal, right? So this will be on forum for feedback.
You mean in the bankless multi-signers proposal? Did I write this in? I can't remember. Okay, dope.
Yeah, it is there. You wrote the ability to veto.
Gotcha.
Cool. Is there in that multi-sig proposal, Sanad, is there what am I thinking of? Well, I guess really what I'm wondering about is just, and maybe this is outside of the scope of right now, Jenga, and if so, let's just move right through it and kind of put it on maybe for the agenda next week. But who should have authority to use snapshot? Like in my mind, I would love to see the multi-sig signers not be those same humans, just so we can sort of put up walls between all those folks. Is that part of the proposal, Sanad? I just haven't really read it.
No, I think this was part of the discussion that was quickly aroused after the proposal. Is like, should be a difference maybe between multi-signers and snapshot, moving proposals to snapshot. Like, how are these rules going to be described? I don't know, but like, yeah, to your point, like there could definitely be a distinction between people that just regularly review proposals and move them to snapshot, and the multi-signers. And this has been kind of, it's not in the proposal yet, not that I know, but I mean, I couldn't even recall integrating a veto. So I think it's not in the proposal yet, but hey, when in doubt, as the community or as the DAO, so we could kind of add a poll of like, what do you think? How do you feel about having a separate group of people moving proposals to snapshot and a separate group of people being multi-signers? And to your point, like it's there's a centralization risk and maybe, things get stuck, whatever. So it's a good point. You can ask the DAO.
Perfect. And then, going back to this BDEP 07, a few learnings that we had, I wrote them in the governance channel. But then I was also wondering, to your point, Trucat, earlier about the quorum. The same types of proposal, if we look 1 year back or more than that, they did not require like a lot of lobbying from what I remember. Like you just post something 60 days, 1 week later, there were 60 votes on it, like magically. But now we need this whole campaigning probably more than before. Also, there are questions on if it's written well or not, and no one was questioning these things before. So like at least I agree, and I know I also said this before, that the quorum is set too high. But what do you all think?
I feel like every start of the year we're discussing quorum height, and I remember last January, I think it was the same. There were like proposals that were supposed to push through, but quorum was a problem. So I don't know.
Good. Did you have any quorum point specifically?
I'm walking up a hill, so it's my. I think we need to rethink whether it's appropriate community alignment. I know that we completely
Is it just me, or
Are you there?
you're rugged?
Hello?
Yeah, could you repeat? We couldn't hear you before.
I just I wonder whether we really need to rethink quorum as a measure of London. I'm suggesting that we get rid of it altogether. But quorum comes out of physical means where they want enough to vote. And so I think we need to think about what the online forum represents. Does it represent everybody being because everyone has access? Or, we're trying to get enough members in the room, so to speak, through the quorum, which is just becoming impossible. So I think we should think about setting it lower and maybe having that, or finding other ways to make sure that, involved people in the community have had a chance to weigh in without having to just set a number.
True raised some really interesting points in her response over the weekend, and from my old world, and I was telling TrueCat this over the weekend as lawyer, and part of what we'd have to do sometimes is draft up corporate minutes to get through different things that the corporation may have done. In my case, it was often agreeing to have the corporation file bankruptcy, but as part of that, you'd have to identify a quorum, and quorum is interesting, right? Because historically, as I think most of us know, it's just how many people need to be present in order to make a decision that's binding, right? And so in corporate boardrooms where these quorum rules have kind of developed over time, the people that are there are all going to vote, right? They're going to vote yes, no, or abstain, but it's really almost unheard of for people who are at these meetings to not vote at all. And we have a very different problem on forum, where you can't just assume that everyone's a member of the forum or is present or otherwise participating. And so I almost feel like the policy of quorum has been conflated a bit. I didn't really start thinking about this until True did that, but why, what are we quoruming for? I mean, it seems, of course, it would just be the traditional thing of making sure there's enough members present or, in order to have a binding decision. But it's weird to think about what presence means, as TrueCat said, on forum, right? And so I'm really keen to follow through with her some of her ideas and see what else we could use as an indicator of consensus, absent quorum numbers, because they're just used a lot different in the real world. And I think part of the reason that we struggle, apart from bear markets and declining participation, this and that, is maybe it doesn't analog over as well as we think we do, just because the historical uses of quorum and the way that quorum is reached is just so different. And so so I think it's worth exploring for sure. And we've been hung up on quorum for a year now, and it seems like this is a darn good time to sort of put this thing to bed one way or the other.
And this is also a key time, right? Because now we have 4 proposals coming up for the multi-sig. Probably each of the work groups that are doing will have at least one of their own proposals. So, and then imagine many of these are either major or significant updates. So reaching this threshold is going to be a challenge.
I don't know why, but I just have models in my head, delegating the responsibility to the governance department, which would probably not be good, or having a representative out of each organizational unit within the DAO acting as a voter for the unit, which maybe is also too early. I think what's the purpose? Yeah, that's a good question. Maybe the organization should feel itself represented in that vote, which means the members are part of units. Okay, and this reasoning could be our units have to vote for it in order for something to pass. And just tell me if I'm wrong, or if you're having other ideas, but we could really think of, instead of quorum, perhaps, to your point, Hero, having to have 100% of the votes from each unit in there. So there is a governance coordinator usually in each guild, right? So this could be part of the governance coordinator, not just coordinating the governance within the guild, but also coordinating the guild within the governance structure of BanklessDAO. So does it make sense?
Yeah, what you're saying, totally articulate.
Yeah, sounds like a form of delegated governance, which I'm all for. Okay.
Oh, thank you, Hero, for articulating what I had said much more clearly. But I think we want to stay away from actually just purely delegating to those people. I think we want everybody who wants to vote to be able to vote. But I think we probably need to find some way of ensuring, yes, that there is representation from all over the DAO and that those people who are in those positions do vote as well. But I don't think that they should be representative of the unit. I think they should just be seen to be weighing in on it.
Isn't it also like one of the purposes to hold, be accountable for? So I'm also, to your point, Trukit, I think it also absolutely makes sense. I also don't want to think of delegating responsibilities too early, right? We want to experiment. But what I'm just thinking of is like how to represent the most people within a vote. And it's like people feel, if the people support, for example, just to continue a little bit running this experiment with having, let's say we have 9 guilds and just the 9 guilds have to vote, okay? So 9 governance coordinators, and these governance coordinators are responsible for transmitting the information to the guild, right? I think at some point BanklessDAO will grow that big that there's just going to be too much for an individual, right? You have to delegate responsibilities and you have to delegate them meaningfully in some way, shape, or form. We're doing this as human beings. Why shouldn't an organization do it where human beings are, an organization made of human beings? And so I'm just thinking of, having the governance coordinator, and there are different ways to do it, is like informing and gathering consensus from within the guild for the DAO level. And having, for example, each guild has 10 members. So you have actually 90 votes represented and 9 votes, right? So either there's a majority within the guild that supports it or against it, kind of. I mean, there are different experiments we can run, but just as like the mental model that I'm kind of, or the path that I'm walking, which, may or may not make sense, but I at least want to get it out.
Yeah, Sanad, it's interesting. I wonder, I wonder why we don't just look to actually use, delegated voting generally, and, literally delegated voting. I delegate my bank to TrueCat to vote for me, as opposed to look at it through these lenses of org units or projects, right? One of the interesting things is, of course, you'll remember, Sanad, from the season 6 transition, is some of that conversation around whether projects and guilds should vote in snapshot, right? And traditionally, none of them do, but there's nothing that bars them from doing that. Side note, I guess. But sometimes I wonder if we should just really put effort into moving our voting on chain to doing delegated voting, in a kind of like an official capacity on a one-on-one level, like a lot of these folks do, as opposed to kind of build some more complex normative structures into delegation. I like what you're saying. It's not about guild coord. I don't know that all guilds have a governance coordinator. The Writers Guild does, Legal Guild does. I just can't rest. How do projects fit in and all of that? And I just wonder if the simplest route to all this is just do straight delegate voting like we're familiar with.
Can I add something? Can you hear me?
Yeah, sure.
Thanks. So legal governance and that delegation is great, but there is a high level of centralization risk. And that's not the only risk, right? There is an issue of, there is a risk of centralization, and there is also an issue of potential corruption, because when you delegate, you're actually relying on someone and trusting that person that they will make an honest judgment and actually do the appropriate vote. However, recently we did have an experience where a member was trusted. However, it did not really turn out to be as such. And that can happen, especially if you're looking to have a very select group of people that you would be able to delegate the vote to. And again, high risk of centralization, because again, so now we're delegating votes to only the few. So as the DAO grows, and sorry, I don't see my screen. Like my Discord is for some reason fucked, so I don't see anything. Someone earlier mentioned the issue, like, the DAO will grow, and so what happens when the DAO grows? So the bigger the DAO, the more what's delegated to a group of people, and what is actual decentralization in that.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point, and I think we see a lot of that also playing out. I know from some communities that where a group of people out of three, let's say a group of three people, actually just one person, because this one person is mainly deciding what the group is doing, has enough delegated tokens to reach quorum and pass proposals, which is something like, this is not where we want to go. The question for me is just, if we delegate voting, to whom are we delegating it, and what is this thing, this whom, made of? And it's like, I think and I've been saying this, I think for quite some time, is like, I think the most important parts to DAO are our guilds and departments. If they don't work, why do we have a DAO? And so I think those people that organize and orientate themselves within a department or within a guild are those that finally then make up the DAO. Like, this is the construct that I have. And so if certain individual or people are corrupt, for example, we may lose them. They may affect the DAO a lot, but we lose them, and this is just one member. And so the impact will be less effective. How should I say that? The impact will be less bad, let's put it this way. Maybe I found a better word. But if an organizational unit is actually corrupt and is voting against things, or like is voting in a corrupt way, it's actually way worse. So I think the way, perhaps, and the strategy to do that would be to delegate, or if creating delegated systems or systems where delegation is possible, the delegation is enabled to actors, where if those people or those units or those groups become corrupt, it affects a lot within the DAO, because then we can try and mitigate that risk and kind of play around it and ensure that it's not happening, right? Put the right people in place, define their rights and responsibilities, educate them. And so to ensure that, we are not getting gamed. But I know, like, we have 4 minutes left. I don't want to hang up too much here. So
yeah, but how do you determine that someone is actually, a good option for having all those delegated votes, right? So what is binding? There is no binding, right? So it's not like you can have sign a contract.
Because we've got away to delegation when I really wanted to bring this as an idea for core. So what I'm saying is that those people added voting rights for rights, so that we've got representation from across people in other many people that vote. They just form the quorum. That was the idea.
Everyone, I'm sorry to pause this conversation. We have 2 minutes left. So I suggest I've dropped a lettuce to talk more about this. Please fill it up. I'll also include it in the notes. And we can continue this conversation in that meeting. Just to round off the agenda, there was one more point about the Collabland airdrop, where at least I would like some quick feedback from all of you. So as you all know, Collabland has announced an airdrop of whatever this is, 150 million tokens, or seems 150. It's like 15% of their supply. We get around 700,000 of this. This is not like free money. We have to make a proposal to them, and then they will distribute the tokens based on the proposal. Now, what they say is that the allocation will be similar to like taking learnings from this optimism community grant, where the tokens were not only claimed by the community, but then were also distributed in a way that the optimism community finally benefited from it. So here it's a multi-step process. Step one is to ask to claim the tokens. Step two is to delegate these tokens to a governance body because they want people to be participating in collab governance in exchange for these tokens. And step three is to distribute these tokens between community members, hopefully in such a way that it benefits collab land again. So yeah, I know we have 1 minute left, but at least my idea was that the DAO Stewards sort of takes this over and puts forward a proposal. But just want to do a quick check on if anyone has other ideas. Bear or Treasury, did you all have any other ideas?
Yeah, we initially thought the claim date is actually 1st of March. So we at Treasury actually thought to make that initial claim proposal just to get that inside the multi-sig and then decide how we want to allocate it further. But if DAO stewards are planning to go with that, then super happy to do that.
All right, maybe you all can start with the first draft, and yeah, since we are all in the same project, we can take it on DMs.
Yep, that makes sense.
I'll just point out that the Thrive Coin prize pool would be totally open to accepting collab tokens as part of any of the prize pools.
That makes sense. Could allocate some retroactively there.
Well, it would go in like future prize pools, and in Thrive you get raffle tickets, and then at each period, or like we just did at the end of the season, based on your Thrive coin, you get so many raffle ticket entries into the raffle, and then it's been mostly NFT projects that have contributed, but we can accept collab tokens just the same. They could even be time locked, maybe. That would be cool.
I think that would make a cool, novel proposal for collab land, because that's what they're looking for. Looking for ideas, not just, we plan to put it in our treasury and see what happens.
Yeah. So happy to help with that.
Yeah, that's my sense too. Like, I don't have any real issue with DAO stewards, of course, taking the lead on that. But I do wonder, and I haven't studied the framework other than that page that TD dropped the other day, but it does seem like a specific proposal indicating how the tokens would be used is important. And I don't have a sense that they want us to take them and sell them, right? And so I think we need to be really clear about what the expectations are around that. Also, like, there's individual allocations too. So that's interesting. If you have the Genesis NFT, ETH Hunter dropped into the Writers Guild the other day and let us know. So in addition to the DAO, many members will also get individual allocations.
Yeah, at least I am not a huge fan of distributing it. It's actually not a huge amount of tokens which we have claim of, and I'm not sure if we want to allocate that through Thrivecoin, and many of us will not be getting any meaningful amount of tokens. So we should at least spend that in a meaningful manner.
Also, in the education department, we teach how to collab session. So it'd be cool to have learn to earn how to collab.
Yeah. Cool. I also think
I like that idea too.
Ernest. Yeah, for sure. I also think we don't need to claim, correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't need to propose something that claims them all at once. Can we get them in piecemeal, as relevant?
I suggest we claim all at once, because if this is like optimism, they'll have more rounds in the future.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jenga. Okay.
Exactly. But yeah, I think like what they're looking for is like a clear distribution strategy and some way that we can say that the distribution we are doing, like your collab land education, for example, Ernest, is sort of contributing back there. But cool. I think Decade, you have to jump to the grants meeting, so I will let you go. Thank you for taking notes, my friend. Yeah, and I think at least that's all I had for today. We all want to hang out and chat more, or you want to bounce?
I want to hang out, but I have to bounce. What to do?
Yeah, I
Responsibility
also
calls.
want to listen to the grants committee meeting. So see you around, guys.
Ciao, friends.
Yeah.
Right.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.